In this video, I tactically analyse Barcelona versus Benfica, identify means of maximising Benfica's attacking potential, identify patterns of defensive fragility, but I don't propose formation changes given they always play with the same structure. Before we get into the video, I'd love some feedback, so leave your comments down below, subscribe and give the video a like. With that, let's get into it. Starting in the second minute with Barcelona resetting into their 2-4 or 3-1 deep build-up shape versus Benfica's man marking. Against a man marking system, Barcelona's forwards cause a problem by disorganising the opposition's press, ultimately creating transitions in their favour. We can see that through Bruch's narrowing, Caldente dropping, as well as also Aitana dropping, which of course is influencing the position of midfielders such as Gasper and Faria. In the system, Alidou was having to jump from pressing a centre-back or marking Kira Walsh to here covering towards Caldente, as Benfica's wing-back tried to push out towards the fullbacks in the wide spaces. On this occasion, Botellas dropping to link play, gets caught in possession, quickly getting back to Alidou, having her cover as much ground as she was. Long term was likely to become an issue. One, because she's really good in both attack and defensive phases. And of course, this jumping from player to player has a high energy cost. And two, it's unlikely there's a quality like-for-like substitute. With Benfica regaining possession, Barcelona immediately looked to try and counter-press to A, slow the counter-attack, and B, let Barca reset defensively, which lets us see Benfica in this 3-2 shape with Gasper and Faria as your centre midfielders, or on occasion Faria does push out into more of a left-back position, covering for the fact that Falcon is typically playing as your wide left midfielder, whilst Alidou could become your second centre-forward, and on rare occasions Faria got involved in the left-hand space. Benfica struggled to be threatening because they were very one-dimensional, so we see here with Silva making a run in behind, but no one else making a third player run. And so unsurprisingly, Benfica's attack breaks down. Graham Hansen passes backwards to her defenders to force a reset and re-establish Barcelona's control of possession. Barca building up in that 3-1 shape with Caldente dropping to help the defenders progress the ball against Benfica's attempted pressing, and this being one of many examples when Benfica's pressing breaks down, as Alidou is caught here ball watching whilst the player she's supposed to be marking in Kira Walsh slips by her, allowing Caldente to escape this press and create a transition in Barcelona's favour. A similar example occurs also in the 45th minute. There's a coherence to Barcelona's attacks in transition, i.e. Bonmati making this run from in to out, typically with Graham Hansen in possession, dragging the opposition defenders with her, creating space centrally for the Barcelona wide midfielder, Botellas or Graham Hansen, to then be able to either run inside into the vacated space or pass into Bonmati, making the underlapping run. And so this is why I call Benfica's attack disjointed. Benfica foul Bruchs to stop that phase of play, and from that Barcelona have a free kick wherein they set up into that 2-3 shape. Bruchs in the previous example positioned more centrally, which allowed Botellas to have more freedom to push out towards the right hand side or just generally roam. As with Bruchs in a central position, it somewhat pins the Benfica defence centrally, creating more space in those wide areas for Botellas and Caldente to exploit. With Bruchs narrowing, that also creates space for Bate to be able to push into a left wing position, making sure that Barcelona maintain their width and sets Barca into more of this 3-1 shape. And so going back to the man marking issue, I think we have another example here with Bonmati dropping, drawing Faria with her, leaving Graham Hansen with a ton of space to exploit, especially given she'll be able to really pick up some steam. But then also centrally we can see with Caldente how she's drawing Gasper deeper into the back line, and so we can see that Benfica's defensive line, the centre backs, are in quite a compromised position due to the man marking system. Fortunately, Barcelona go out wide into Graham Hansen, and so we get to see that somewhat trademark Bonmati underlapping run, pass from Graham Hansen into her, whilst she then can make a run into the space vacated as Bonmati is tracked wide. And as mentioned earlier, that usually leaves the centre completely vacated for other forwards such as Botellas or potentially Caldente. Instead is making also another underlapping run to exploit. Further to Graham Hansen being able to drive inside, this usually allows her to be able to then combine with whoever is central, so whether that's Caldente or Botellas, to either cross towards the back post or shoot straight towards goal. Benfica defend Putellas' shot from the throw-in, but beyond giving the far-sided wing-back license to position for a counter-attack, this example shows somewhat haphazard approach to counter-attacking, with Kika's somewhat aimless long ball. Speaking of aggressively positioned wing-back, we get to see that with Falcon's position shortly after Barca on regaining possession, set up into that 3-1. For brevity, I can inset the 24th minute wherein Barca set up in this 3-1 in that example as well. Here we've got Battier and Graham Hansen holding the width. We've had Bruce narrow into another centre forward position, Giraldez and Bonmati dropping to try and link the play, whilst Benfica try and man mark to a certain degree. Fortunately, through Giraldez's miscontrol, Benfica get in possession and Alidou is able to play a sumptuous ball to Falcon, but she prematurely had started her run and is caught offside. Okay, so for the sake of balance, I wanted to include a successful situation where Benfica have pressed. So we see that here in the 6th minute. We can also have a look at the 75th amongst a couple of others. So this is just coming off the back of Silva's half chance. Unfortunately, my comments about the haphazard nature of Benfica's counter-attacks or attacks in transition apply here, with Amadou regaining possession after a successful press, but she shoots instead of capitalizing on 1, Barcelona being out of position, specifically 2, spread out, and 2, having Benfica numbers suddenly in attacking positions. See Alidou especially, who makes a great run. Continuing with the theme of successful pressing, we've got Benfica winning back possession in the 26th minute, passing it back into their defence and setting up into a 3-1 or a 3-2. Note that we have one of our wide centre-backs higher up the pitch due to the press, as well as also Faria, who in possession either partnered Gasper or played as more of a left-back at left centre-back currently. Unfortunately, Benfica reinforced my point about a lack of cohesion, with on this occasion Silva dropping to try and get involved in the deep build-up play, but unfortunately her teammates aren't making threatening runs in behind to substitute for her having dropped, except maybe Alidou, but she's an implausible option. Fortunately, eventually Faria is able to play a long ball for Falcon's curved run in behind, but unfortunately the pass is just simply too straight and central, making it easy for Catacol to be able to sweep. Moving on a tad, we get to see Benfica set up in a 2-1-3 shape typically. At the moment it's more of a 2-2, but only because Gasper is staying deeper than typical. Typically Seika seem to be positioning as a quasi-CDM, with the rest of the centre midfielders positioning above her. This being against Barcelona in this 4-1-3-2 shape, or 3-2-3-2, with one of your defenders joining Kira Walsh in behind those first 2 lines of the press. Benfica sought to get beyond this press by having the defenders, but especially Pauels, playing long balls either out into the wing backs or between the lines for Kika. Unfortunately, whilst Pauels could connect her passes, they weren't always well directed enough to create momentum in Benfica's favour, as on this occasion. Given the focus of this video on Benfica's tactics, as it goes without saying that Barcelona have the better 11, the better squad depth, and the better team tactical IQ, I wanted to look at how Benfica could improve their chances with minimal changes. And so I start with this scenario in the 7th minute, where unlike several other occasions where Benfica's press was lacking, here they're close enough, they're pressing with enough intensity to force Engen, who really should be the focus of the initial stage of the press, being forced into an error. However, Amadou doesn't consider options, chooses a very low XG option, and if Benfica could get into this type of scenario again in the Benfica versus Barcelona tie, and Amadou instead plays a chipped pass or a slide rule pass, or even just keeps possession, that'll be a huge improvement. Another example is where Benfica managed to defend a transition created by Catacol, as she did on a few occasions, playing over the Benfica initial stages of their press into Putellas, which Barcelona did to stress test the Benfica centre-backs, who essentially could end up 3 versus 3. Through Alidou's persistence and Kika Nazareth's fortunate over and under ball, Benfica create a chance. Unfortunately, whilst Alidou has done so well, forcing Barcelona into this somewhat compromised position, she's unaware of Silva's run underlapping her, who would have had a much better angle at the goal than Alidou did. Last example, I promise, has Benfica in that 3-2 shape with Gasper and Faria versus Barcelona in what was meant to be a 4-4-2, but you have your far far-sided wide midfielder narrowing to put pressure on the far-sided centre-back, although one could argue that it was a 4-1-4-1 anyway. The initial point of change would be looking to play more diagonals rather than very straight balls in behind for those wing-backs Alves and Falcon running in behind to prevent the Barca goalkeeper, Catacol, etc. getting involved, but then also picking better times to press, such as this, where 1. Benfica's markers are very close to their opposition. 2. The Barcelona defenders are caught somewhat unaware or unprepared to see specifically Engen and Mapillon, who are both facing towards their goals. And then 3. See how Alidou has bent her run towards Catacol first, making sure that she's covering the pass into Mapillon and then passing towards Catacol. And from there, Barca look to clear their lines. Benfica able to defend that. Alves, being the fighter she is, manages to squeeze a pass into Gasper. And just as with the earlier situation with Amadou, Gasper chooses to shoot from an unholy distance, hugely unfavourable to Benfica, rather than using the numerous supporting runs that she had available to her. To keep this video short, I'm not discussing Barcelona's corner kick, from which Benfica actually had some luck because Mapillon is heavily involved as the corner kick taker, and you can see the examples in the 50th minute and the 55th. Firstly, I acknowledge that the premise of this analysis is heavily outcome biased. If this was comprehensive, I wouldn't just look at the goals conceded, but also all high XG chances. But this was in the interest of time. On a similar track, I could have looked at the goal Barcelona conceded against Eintracht Frankfurt in this UEFA Champions League campaign, but I'm assuming that Benfica won't be able to replicate that, given it involved a throw-in in Barcelona's defensive third and loading the box. The patterns to Benfica's goals conceded were: first, they were more defensively leaky away from home. Of course, it's a small sample versus Barcelona, as we saw their man marking system repeatedly broke down either in Barcelona's defensive third or where the Benfica defense sought to try and reset, but there was confusion. And then secondly, there were also issues with their spacing or their positioning. I'm worried this is a bit of a catch-all versus Frankfurt. Again, it's a man marking system breakdown and individual defensive one-on-one issues. And against Rosengard, it's also a case of positioning and spacing errors amongst both the defenders and midfielders. And so starting with the Barcelona issues, we've got an example here in the 52nd minute. Technically, it's actually a 4-3 with Benfica's midfield heavily covering over towards this right-hand side, with Falcon pushing higher on that left-hand side into a counter-attacking position, ultimately leaving Amadou 1v1 against Graham Hansen, which of course Barcelona are quick to try and take advantage of, with Bruch switching the play. This is a great example of the positioning or spacing problems. Firstly, Amadou being left one-on-one against one of the most dangerous wingers in the whole competition. Secondly, Alidou and Faria both pointing rather than just taking the initiative and looking to try and defend Bonmati. And so Araujo both has to position to defend Bonmati, but then also to be able to cover for when Graham Hansen inevitably beats her defender. However, Alidou and Faria pointing and Gasper not covering, not anticipating, means that Graham Hansen is allowed to play this simple pass into Bonmati, who has a free shot in Benfica's penalty area. Next, we have a look at Benfica set up in this 3-1 or 3-2 shape versus Eintracht Frankfurt. They're forced into retreating somewhat, but eventually look to play a ball similar to how they did against Barcelona, a lobbed ball into a forward. On this occasion, it's Alidou. The attack breaks down, and whilst Alidou immediately counter-presses her teammate here in Amado, who's now the right wing-back, is slow to support, and so starts a domino effect, allowing Frankfurt to pick off players with their passing. Of course, there's luck in the eventual shot, but the lesson needs to be that Benfica going forward have one, maybe two players who communicate when the team as a whole will press, to centralise the decision making, and B, reduce the distance between themselves and the opposition players. Again, that goes back to centralising the decision making. And lastly, Benfica versus Rosengard in this 3-1 shape, with a near-sided wide centre-back getting up in support in the wide space, wherein initially Benfica are able to repel that attack, forcing Eintracht to switch the play out towards their right-hand side. Similar to Barcelona, they have a run from in to out, although no third player runs. Despite there being less complexity to Rosengard's attack, Benfica's defence almost immediately becomes extremely disjointed, shown not just by the spaces between the back line, but also Falcon failing to track her opponent, creating a domino effect, again allowing her teammates to be picked off. And so with that, we showed how Benfica could dramatically improve their attacking chances by capitalising on when they have those successful pressing situations with simple passes taking advantage of the players in support, and two, centralising who decides when they press so that they're better set up and aren't picked off. With that, if you've enjoyed this video, let me know down in the comments, share it on social media and subscribe. With that, we're out.